Have you ever given your all to someone? Your love, your loyalty, your time, only to feel invisible in return? You stood by them in silence, through chaos, through distance, through cold words and confused energy, hoping they'd one day recognize the fire you carried. But they didn't. And here's the thing most people won't tell you. It's not because you weren't enough. It's because they couldn't see beyond their own limits. This is the common lie we're sold, that if someone doesn't choose you, you must have lacked something. But that's a trap, isn't it? It keeps you chasing, explaining, shrinking, when the truth is far more liberating and much more powerful. The truth is, they didn't see your worth because they weren't capable of recognizing something real, something deep. And you were the real thing. Let me ask you something. What if the pain they caused wasn't meant to destroy you, but to wake you up? What if the rejection you felt wasn't a reflection of your value, but a redirection toward your becoming? People miss out on gold every day while chasing glitter. That's not your burden, that's their blindness. And now it's time to change the game. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right. To reclaim what you gave away too freely. To rise, not with noise, but with purpose. Not to beg for closure, but to embody it. That's what this message is. It's not another motivational script to hype you up for 5 minutes and fade. No, this is a mirror, a revelation, a call to rise through the wisdom of stoicism, through the quiet fire of self-respect, and through the unshakable power of clarity. You see, in Stoic relationships, it's not about how loud you are when someone leaves. It's about how steady you are when you finally stop chasing. It's about recognizing that not everyone is meant to hold your heart, and that's okay, because the person you're becoming now, they are built from the silence, from the ache, from the growth. This is your pivot point, and if you feel like you've been walking around with a weight that isn't yours, this moment can change everything. That's why you're here. That's why you've felt what you've felt. Because the next version of you, the one they never saw coming, is ready to emerge. So stay with me, because what's coming next will show you, in no uncertain terms, why they couldn't see your value, and why your rise will be the quiet revolution that says more than any words ever could. Ready? Let's begin. 1. You were the flame. They took your warmth for granted. You ever notice how some people only recognize value once it's gone? How they lean into your light, your kindness, your unwavering presence like it's oxygen, only to mock it the moment they feel full? It's a pattern, isn't it? You give, they take. You love deeply, they skim the surface. You remain present in the storm. They act like your consistency is just background noise. And while they float through distraction after distraction, you're the one who kept showing up, who kept pouring out warmth in cold spaces, believing, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they'd feel it, see it, honor it. But what happens when fire is taken for granted? When the one providing light begins to burn out, not from lack of love, but from lack of respect? That's what happened to you. You weren't just another flicker in the wind. You were the fire. And they thought they could stand near it, use it, benefit from it, without giving anything back. They stood too close, complained about the heat, then shivered the second you stepped away. And now, as they sit in the dark, they don't miss the convenience. They miss the connection. They miss the way you made them feel safe, the way you were there even when they gave you nothing to hold on to. But let's be clear, it wasn't your duty to keep someone warm who refused to bring you shelter. Stoicism teaches us that our energy is not infinite and that it must be guarded as sacred. You can't continue to burn for those who only ever show up with smoke. You were the kind of soul that held space for their chaos while they mistook your presence for permanence. They assumed you would always be there, always forgiving, always understanding. And that's where they went wrong, because even the strongest fires fade when fed only with neglect. Think about it. How many times did you extend grace when they gave you distance? How often did you reach out, only to be met with silence or excuses or apathy disguised as detachment, and yet you stayed because your heart doesn't know how to give halfway. You gave your best, even when they were offering you the bare minimum. But the turning point, it wasn't a dramatic exit. It wasn't a final argument or some cinematic goodbye. It was quiet. It was the moment your soul whispered that it had enough. The moment you realized your light was being used, not valued. That's the moment everything shifted. And what did they do when you left, when your warmth disappeared? They felt it. Not immediately. No. Ego is louder than awareness at first. But over time, in the quiet, in the dark, in the loneliness they swore they preferred, your absence became louder than your presence ever was. That's the irony. They didn't notice your heat until they were freezing. They didn't appreciate your loyalty until they were alone. They thought the fire would last forever, that no matter how careless they were, you'd keep burning. But Stoic relationships aren't built on endurance alone. They're built on reciprocity, on mutual reverence. And the truth is, you were never supposed to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. Not then. Not now. Because fire, when respected, sustains life. But when abused, it consumes. You were the steady flame, the patient lantern in their storm. And they treated you like a temporary spark. They didn't understand that you were the light keeping their shadows from swallowing them whole. But now they do. Now they sit with memories that glow brighter than any replacement. Because no matter how many new people they chase, how many shallow connections they try to dive into, none of them carry your spark. None of them hold the stillness, the grace, the heat that only you brought. They're out there, laughing louder, pretending harder, but underneath it all is the cold. The kind that doesn't go away when the sun rises, the kind that clings. Because it's not just about missing someone, it's about missing something irreplaceable, something true. And that truth, that's you. You were the partner who stayed, calm in chaos, who listened without judgment, who showed up without needing to be asked. You were the one who held the space when they had nothing to give back. But they confused your silence with weakness, your patience with passivity, your fire with fragility. But now that you're gone, they're discovering just how strong that fire truly was, because your absence isn't just a gap, it's a void. A chill that seeps into the corners of every empty room, every shallow conversation, every empty night, where they scroll through pictures and try to feel something that used to be so freely given. They underestimated your energy because they never imagined it would run out. But it did, and that's the lesson they never saw coming. Because when stoicism meets heartbreak, it doesn't react. It reflects. It doesn't scream. It transforms. And that's what you've done. You haven't crumbled, you've crystallized, hardened by truth, refined by pain, ignited by clarity. You no longer burn for those who only stood near you when they were cold. You burn for yourself, for your future, for the purpose that waited behind the pain. And they will see it, not in your words, not in your posts, but in your glow. In the way you walk now, in the peace you carry, in the boundaries you no longer break. They'll see it in the life you build without them, and it will haunt them. Not because you wanted revenge, but because you found rebirth. That's the power of Stoicism. It teaches us that external validation is fleeting, but internal mastery is permanent. You've mastered your fire now. You know what it's worth. And you'll never again let someone play with it like it's disposable. You are the flame. You were always the flame. And now, as they shiver in the cold of their own choices, you rise in the warmth of your own becoming. So let them feel it. Let the silence echo. Let the memories do the speaking. Because the ones who misuse fire never forget the burn. And the one who rises from it, that's the one who becomes untouchable. In this new season, you don't shrink. You don't dim. You radiate. And the right ones, the ones who carry their own spark, will meet you in that heat. Not to take from it, but to add to it. That is the promise of Stoic relationships. Mutual warmth, grounded respect, and the sacred refusal to be mishandled again. 2. They played games, but you were the queen in a different arena. You ever feel like someone thought they were winning while they were actually losing you? Like they were so focused on appearing detached, so caught up in pretending not to care, that they missed the fact that your silence wasn't confusion, it was calculation. That's what happens when people play games. They mistake emotional immaturity for strength, ego for power, and withholding for strategy. But here's what they never expected. You weren't even playing the same game. While they were busy keeping score, pulling away first, trying to appear less invested, you were studying the entire board, observing their moves not to respond but to understand. They were playing checkers. You were mastering chess. Stoicism teaches us that patience is not passivity, that stillness is not weakness. You were the queen, not just because you loved deeply or gave unconditionally, but because you moved with purpose. They thought they had time. They thought they had control. They thought your loyalty meant you had nowhere else to go. But the truth is, you were never trapped. You were choosing to be there. And the moment that choice shifted, everything they thought they knew crumbled. They didn't see it coming because they never saw you clearly to begin with. Immaturity clouds perception. They thought it was about who could ghost the longest, who could pretend better, who could care less. But you were never there to win a contest of emotional detachment. You were there to build something real, something rare. And when you realized they were not capable of meeting you in that space, you didn't beg. You didn't explain. You left. Not in a dramatic way, not with a storm, but with the quiet clarity of someone who's finally seen enough. And now, as they replay every moment in their head, trying to understand when it shifted, you're already miles ahead. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. You didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because you started caring more about yourself. And now they're not just dealing with your absence, they're facing the consequences of their own immaturity. You see, they were playing a game with someone who wasn't even keeping score. They thought detachment was strength. But real strength? It's knowing when to walk away from what no longer serves your peace. They thought they could push you, test you, and you'd always return. But queens don't orbit around uncertainty. They don't beg for attention. They don't compete with noise. They build empires in silence. They hold their ground. They move with wisdom. And when they leave, they don't come back. Because the Stoic path doesn't loop, it ascends. And now in your silence they feel it. The shift, the space, the energy that once centered them has been reclaimed. They scroll through conversations that once felt mundane, now haunted by the grace they mistook for naivety. They try to replicate the connection, chase new thrills, distract themselves with fleeting flings, but nothing feels right. Because once you've tasted depth, the shallow becomes unbearable. You weren't just another player. You were the entire board. And they didn't even know the rules. You offered love without manipulation. You gave space without punishment. You led with loyalty when they were still figuring out how to spell it. And yet, they treated you like a piece, easily moved, easily replaced. But Stoic relationships are not built on dominance. They are built on discernment. And you discerned the game and exited it with dignity. They tried to make you feel like you were too much, too emotional, too intense. But in truth, you were too real for someone still hiding behind performance. You weren't trying to impress, you were trying to connect. And now, they're stuck in a loop of empty gestures, meaningless validation, and performative love. While you're building in silence, growing in peace, evolving with every breath. And they can't touch it. Not because you've become distant, but because you've become elevated. You've outgrown the table, you've upgraded your standards, you've learned that being misunderstood by the wrong people is not your burden to carry. Because queens don't explain their value, they embody it. And now that you've stepped away, the board feels empty. Not because they lost someone who needed them, but because they lost someone who once chose them. And choice is everything. It's not about revenge. It's about revelation. You reveal to yourself who you are, what you deserve, and how sacred your love is. You revealed to them, in your absence, just how much they were given and how little they appreciated it. That's the twist they never expected, that their biggest flex, acting unbothered, became their greatest regret. Because now they're the ones sitting with silence, questioning every move, haunted by a game they thought they were winning. And the silence? That's your power. That's stoicism. It's the restraint not to react, the strength to move on, without closure, the wisdom to know that peace is more valuable than pride. And now, as they watch you rise, unapologetic, untouchable, they'll realize that what they played with was a one-of-a-kind soul. And once a queen makes her final move, the game is over. Not just for them, but for every version of you that ever doubted your worth. And here's your moment. If this message reflected even a glimpse of your truth, if you feel this fire in your soul and know you're walking into your era of no longer explaining, no longer chasing, then it's time to claim it. Like this video and comment number 1 if you feel the truth in this part of the story. And don't forget to subscribe. We're building something powerful here, a space of healing, truth, and transformation through stoicism and real, deep, stoic relationships. This is only the beginning. Let's keep rising. 3. They mocked your patience, but now you reap the harvest. Isn't it strange how people laugh at what they don't understand? How they mock stillness, misjudge patience, and underestimate those who don't demand attention. You were planting seeds, quietly, steadily, with intention, and they rolled their eyes. They said you were wasting your time, that you were too soft, too loyal, too believing. But that's because they never understood the process. They never understood that growth doesn't happen under spotlights or applause. It happens underground, where no one sees. In silence, in discomfort, in self-discipline, you kept showing up when it made no sense to. You stayed loyal when walking away would have been easier. You gave your best when no one was watching, when no one believed in what you were building, including them. And while they dismissed your presence, doubted your vision, and mocked your consistency, they didn't see what was forming beneath the surface. But now, everything's different. The harvest is blooming, not because you were louder, but because you were deeper. And the same ones who called you naive are the ones now staring through the gate of a garden they never believed would grow. They didn't understand that real transformation isn't performative. It's quiet. It's rooted in stoicism, in the kind of endurance that doesn't need to be seen to be strong. You weren't desperate. You were preparing. You weren't clinging. You were cultivating. And now that your harvest is visible, they want to revisit the soil they walked away from. But it's too late, because those gates, they're not just metaphorical, they're boundaries. Built from pain, fertilized by every moment you doubted yourself but kept going anyway. They thought they were watching you struggle. What they didn't realize is they were watching you evolve. And that evolution, it doesn't rewind for those who laughed during the build. Think about how many times they made you feel ridiculous for believing in the future, for loving with no scoreboard, for staying when things were silent, awkward, or uncertain. They mistook your patience for weakness because they couldn't fathom a love that wasn't transactional. But yours was. You gave, not because you were trying to win them over, but because giving is who you are. And that's the difference. That's the strength they never recognized, because they were used to people performing. You were practicing. Purpose, you loved not to be chosen, but because you chose to love. And now that energy is manifesting not in loud ways, but in solid, undeniable growth. Every moment you spent healing, every minute you chose solitude over false connection, every time you watered your own spirit when no one else cared to notice, it's all showing. Not in noise, in glow, in peace, in presence. And here's the part that might sting, not for you, but for them. Now that they see the garden, they realize what they lost. And it's not just about missing you, it's about missing what they could have had if they hadn't mocked what they didn't understand. Because they weren't just doubting you, they were doubting something sacred, something timeless, and now they're stuck in dry places, chasing shortcuts, while you harvest everything they said wouldn't bloom. That's the poetic justice of Stoic relationships. You rise not by retaliation, but by remaining rooted in who you are. And now their laughter has turned into silence, not because they've changed, but because they've been proven wrong in the most powerful way, through your becoming. You didn't collapse. You cultivated. You didn't lash out. You let go. You didn't shrink. You simplified. And in that simplification, you found clarity. You found that all the noise they created to distract you, all the judgment they projected onto your journey was never about you. It was about them, about their inability to sit with themselves, about their discomfort with someone who didn't need drama to feel alive. You see, when you start growing, you realize most people don't mock you because they're confident. They mock because they're scared. Your patience revealed their impulsiveness. Your endurance exposed their instability, and your silence forced them to hear their own chaos. That's the part they don't tell you, that your growth will offend those who haven't started their own, that your steadiness will become a mirror they can't avoid. And yet you never did it for that. You never watered your soul to prove them wrong. You did it to survive, to heal, to rise. And now your life is a reflection of that quiet, unshakable decision. And as the seasons pass, as you continue to expand, they will feel it deeper, not because you're rubbing it in, but because your harvest is undeniable. It speaks louder than any defense you could have made. It glows brighter than any argument, because you were never the one who needed convincing. They were. And now, as they scroll past your peace, hear about your progress, or sit in rooms that feel just a little colder without your warmth, they will remember, not out of guilt but out of realization, that the one they mocked is the one they now admire from a distance, that the one they thought would never move on is now untouchable. Not out of bitterness, but out of evolution. You've shifted timelines, you've rewritten the story, and now your life isn't just a comeback, it's a new chapter entirely. The laughter has stopped, the doubts have faded, the disrespect has no access. Because the version of you that once waited to be seen has already been claimed by you. That's the essence of Stoicism. You stop trying to be understood and start becoming undeniable. You let go of needing validation and embody the validation. You move from being reactive to being rooted, and that version of you, that's what they never saw coming. You are no longer waiting to bloom in someone else's season. You're the season now. And everything around you reflects that. Your peace, your standards, your boundaries, your joy, your entire presence now carries a weight that comes from weathering storms they couldn't even comprehend. So when they try to come back, when they test the gate, when they drop breadcrumbs of curiosity or regret, remember this: they laughed when you were planting. They doubted when you were healing. They walked away when you needed support. And now that the flowers are in full bloom, they want to stroll through the garden like they never left. But this isn't revenge. This is recognition. You recognize what you've built, what it took to get here, and how much of your soul had to grow in private before it could shine in public. And for that, you owe no one entry. The harvest is not for those who mocked the soil. It's for you, for the future. You kept believing in even when no one else did. For the quiet mornings when you wanted to give up but didn't. For the nights you cried but still chose hope. For the days you questioned your worth but chose to show up anyway. That's who this is for. That's who you did this for. And now, as the sun hits different, as your world fills with things you once only dreamed about, remember this truth. No amount of laughter can drown the sound of roots breaking ground. You were never too slow, never too soft, never too patient. You were precise, and now you're powerful. This is what Stoic relationships produce. Not chaos, but character. Not attention, but alignment. Not followers, but fulfillment. So don't look back. Don't question whether they've learned. That's their journey. You've got flowers to tend to, a life to water, a future to live. And it all began the moment you chose not to listen to the noise, but to the whisper of your own becoming. 4. They chose glitter, but you were the diamond in the dirt. Isn't it wild how easily people get distracted by the glitter, the noise, the surface-level shine that fades the moment the light shifts? They chase what sparkles fast, what talks loud, what makes them feel something instantly, even if it's shallow. That's what they did with you. You were the diamond, buried in patience, wrapped in substance, coated in truth, but they walked past you like you were just another stone. Because their eyes weren't trained to see depth. They were chasing novelty, not value. And when you offered realness, consistency, effort, they mistook it for ordinary. That's the tragedy of the impatient soul. They don't stay long enough to see what lasts. They picked glitter, not realizing it was temporary. And you? You were the kind of love, the kind of person, the kind of presence that doesn't dim over time. It deepens. But they never gave it the chance. They were too busy entertaining the flashy, the easy, the ones who give just enough to seem exciting, but never enough to be real. And so they left. Not because you lacked anything, but because they lacked the depth to recognize it. They walked away thinking they upgraded. But what they really did was downgrade with confidence, because the truth about glitter is it fades fast. It doesn't hold under pressure. It doesn't shine in darkness. But diamonds were made in it. And now, while they're out there grasping at things that sparkle and break, you're becoming something unbreakable, something undeniable. And the irony? Now that their vision has cleared, now that the surface-level distractions have dulled, they finally see what they missed, you. They start to realize that what they passed up wasn't just another option. It was the rarest thing they'll ever come across. And here's what they'll never say out loud. Every new person they meet, they compare to you. Every fleeting connection reminds them of the stability you once offered. Every smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes, every conversation that lacks depth, every new situation that leaves them feeling hollow, it all brings them back to you. Because you weren't glitter, you weren't noise, you were essence. And you can't replace that. You can't copy and paste a soul. You can't manufacture depth. And no matter how hard they try, everything else will feel off now. Because once you've seen a diamond, everything else looks like glass. But here's where stoicism enters. You didn't need them to see it to validate it. You already knew what you carried. You already knew what your love was worth. Your value wasn't diminished by their blindness. It was confirmed by your solitude, because it takes courage to remain solid in a world chasing shine. It takes wisdom to know that glitter attracts everyone, but diamonds are only sought after by those who know what they're looking for. And you've stopped trying to be seen by those who can't see. You've stopped shrinking your glow to match their shallow vision. You've stopped explaining the complexity of your heart to people who only understand convenience. That's your growth. That's your liberation, because now they're haunted not just by your absence, but by their own choice. They had it, and they walked away from it. They thought they were walking away from a phase, but what they walked away from was the realest thing they'll ever know. And now, while they chase counterfeit feelings, you're sitting in clarity. You no longer need to ask why they didn't choose you. You no longer need closure from someone who couldn't comprehend the magnitude of what you offered, because you've realized it wasn't rejection, it was redirection. It wasn't loss, it was protection. You weren't discarded, you were spared. Because someone who trades diamonds for glitter isn't equipped to hold what you bring. And the beautiful twist, you no longer wish they had seen it. You're grateful they didn't, because your peace is too precious to be placed in reckless hands. Your light is too sacred to be shared with those who only want to borrow it. And now, as you rise, as you grow, as you radiate, they're left trying to make sense of the void. But they can't, because your energy isn't something that can be explained. It's felt, it's remembered, it's missed in the places where depth is required. And Stoic relationships, the real ones, the aligned ones, they don't ask you to shine less. They don't flinch at your fullness. They honor it. They see the diamond. They hold it with care. And most of all, they stay, not because it's easy, but because it's real. So if you've ever wondered whether you were too much, whether you were asking for too much, whether you should have softened your shine to be chosen, stop. You weren't too much, you were too rare. And their inability to see it is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their capacity. They weren't ready. And now they're watching from afar, not just filled with regret, but with the awareness that they'll never hold that light again. And that's not your burden. That's their lesson. You're done proving your value to those who look for shine in the wrong places. You're done waiting for recognition from those who choose comfort over connection. And you're done asking to be chosen by someone who never deserved you in the first place. This is your time, your path, your glow. And if this part of your journey resonates, if you feel that inner shift, that unshakable calm that only comes when you finally stop chasing and start becoming, then make it known. Like this video and comment number 1 if you see yourself in this story. Subscribe and join us as we build something deep, something transformative, something rooted in truth. Because this space isn't about hype, it's about healing. This is what rising looks like, and we're just getting started. 5. You were the light. They thought it was the room. Have you ever walked into a space and felt something shift? Not because of the decor, not because of the environment, but because of the presence within it. That presence was you. You were the warmth, the glow, the grounding force that made everything feel alive. But they didn't see it. They thought it was the room. They thought it was the vibe. They thought it was the setting, the timing, the moment. And now, as they return to that same space, whether literally or emotionally, it feels different. It feels cold. It feels empty. And they can't quite put their finger on why. But you know, because you were never the furniture. You were the fire. You were never the background. You were the energy. And now that your light is gone, they're sitting in the dark, trying to recreate what only your presence could provide. This is what happens when people take the source for granted. They think peace just happens. They think comfort just exists. They think clarity is the default. But the truth is, those were gifts you brought into their world. You made chaos quiet. You made heavy things feel lighter. You stood like a lantern in the storm, never demanding praise, never asking for recognition, just shining because that's who you are. And they mistook it for the atmosphere, but it wasn't the room that gave them peace. It was you. Stoicism teaches us that light doesn't have to shout to be seen. It just shines. And the sun never chases anything. It simply exists, and those who understand its value orbit around it, not to possess it, but to align with it. That's who you are. Not someone to be contained or explained. Not someone to be used for mood or convenience. You are the center, the source, the reason, and the ones who failed to recognize that, they're now walking through identical rooms, meeting similar people, hearing familiar words, but none of it feels the same, because the light is missing. And the deeper truth? They never contributed to that glow. They only consumed it. You were the one who asked the right questions, who held space, who remembered the details, who noticed the shift in energy before anyone said a word. You were the one who stayed when things got uncomfortable, who leaned in when most people would walk out, and they thought that kind of presence was just part of the environment. But now, in your absence, they see it wasn't. It was you, that glow they miss. It wasn't the timing or the energy or the us they keep romanticizing. It was the you they didn't honor, and now they scroll through memories like windows to a place they can't return to. Not because it's burned down, but because it's evolved. You've evolved. You're no longer lighting rooms for those who treat you like a fixture. You're no longer offering presents to those who only know how to consume. You've learned the difference between those who admire your glow and those who respect your flame. The former come to watch, the latter come to build. And now, stoically, you've pulled your energy inward, not out of spite, but out of reverence. Because your light isn't a performance, it's a privilege, and the ones who treat it like wallpaper, like ambience, like convenience, they lose it. Not in some grand event, but slowly, quietly, through each missed moment of appreciation, through each instance of being seen but not valued, through every time you lit the space but were left standing, in the shadows, until one day you walked out, not to prove a point, but to protect your peace. And now, as they sit in rooms that feel colder, flatter, duller, they realize it was never the room that gave them life. It was you. Your energy, your essence, your way of turning mundane things into meaning, of taking ordinary spaces and filling them with soul. That's what they're missing. And no matter how they try to replace it with new people, louder laughs, brighter distractions, it doesn't hit the same. Because light isn't measured by noise, it's felt in presence. And when someone has truly experienced light, they can't unfeel it. They can't forget how it made them feel. They can't replicate it in rooms built on ego and image. And now they sit in those rooms with all the things they thought mattered, status, aesthetics, social circles, but none of it glows. Because what they lost wasn't visual, it was spiritual, emotional, deep. And they can't buy it back, they can't chase it down. Because that light now shines somewhere else, within you. And Stoicism reminds us, light never begs to be seen. It simply is. And when it's no longer present, its absence speaks volumes. So let them feel it, not to punish, but to reflect. Let them sit in their spaces, decorated to perfection, surrounded by people who check boxes but don't spark soul. Let them search for what you brought, knowing they'll never name it, but they'll always notice it. And you no longer wonder why they couldn't see it. You no longer try to explain the light to those who only know how to stand in it. Never how to protect it. You're past that. Because now you shine for yourself. You walk into your own spaces with full awareness of what you carry. And the right ones, they won't just admire it, they'll match it, they'll bring their own flame, their own depth, their own peace. That's the beauty of alignment. It doesn't compete, it complements. And Stoic relationships, they don't drain your light, they amplify it. You no longer need the validation of someone who mistook you for the wallpaper. You've become the whole atmosphere. You are the light, not the space. And anyone who confuses the two is not meant to walk with you. Let them remember, let them scroll, let them wonder. But don't you dim, don't you pause. Don't you ever shrink to fit back into a space that was only lit because you were in it. You're done lighting rooms for those who never asked how. You were glowing. Now you light up your own path, and those who deserve to walk beside you will bring their own fire. 6. They dropped the crown, now it's out of reach. You ever watch someone throw something away with confidence, like they truly believed it had no value, only to come back later with regret painted across their face, realizing what they discarded was priceless? That's exactly what they did. When they dropped you, they dropped the crown, not by accident, but with pride, convinced they'd find something shinier, easier, more convenient. But what they failed to understand is that you weren't just another accessory in their story. You were the centerpiece, the one who stood strong through every storm, who carried grace in silence, who loved with the kind of loyalty that doesn't ask for praise, just presence. And when they let go, they weren't letting go of a phase. They were letting go of a legacy, because the crown wasn't theirs, it was yours. And now, as they look back, their hands are empty, and the weight of that absence sits heavier with every passing moment. That's the power of realization. It never comes when it should. It comes when the door is already closed, when the throne is occupied by someone else, when the one they mistreated is no longer within reach. And Stoicism reminds us, your value isn't proven by who chooses to stay. It's revealed by who fails to replace you. They thought you'd always be there, didn't they? That your grace was endless, your forgiveness on tap, your love unconditional to a fault. But even unconditional love has a boundary. It's called self-respect. And when you found yours, everything changed. You stopped explaining. You stopped chasing. You stopped trying to make them see the worth they chose to ignore. And now they see it, not through your words, but through your absence, through the way you've elevated without them, through the silence that replaced their chaos, through the peace that now surrounds you like armor. They dropped the crown because they thought it was just decoration. They didn't realize it was a symbol of your loyalty, your strength, your quiet power. They assumed that what you gave could be found anywhere, that your kind of love was replicable, that someone else could fill your shoes without missing a step. But what they didn't see then, they feel now. There's no substitute for royalty. And your crown, it didn't stay on the ground. It didn't tarnish in their absence. It rose with you. Because you were never dependent on their recognition to shine. You shine because it's who you are, not a performance, not a role, but a truth you embody. And now they walk past memories like exhibits of a history they can no longer touch. The conversations, the laughter, the forgiveness, the presence, it all echoes now because nothing haunts more than the sound of a closed door. And the hardest part? They know they closed it. They know they fumbled it. They know they chose ego over intimacy, games over growth. And now they live in a world where your name carries weight they can't bear. Every attempt to replace you fails, not because others aren't enough, but because you were everything they didn't understand at the time. And you? You've stopped hoping they'll wake up. You've stopped waiting for that apology, for the recognition, for the validation. Because your power doesn't depend on what they realize. It grows in the space where you finally chose yourself. That's the power of Stoic relationships. You don't demand to be seen. You become the vision. You don't wait to be crowned. You wear it with or without their approval. And you don't ask to be chosen. You choose you. Over and over. Every time. They didn't drop just anyone. They dropped the kind of soul that only comes once in a lifetime. And now that truth follows them into every connection, every new maybe, every almost, that never quite feels right. Because no matter how far they run, they can't outrun the echo of your grace. It sits in the silence. It lingers in the spaces that used to be filled by you. And as they watch you rise, quietly, consistently, gloriously, they realize that the crown is no longer in reach. It's not just about losing access, it's about losing legacy. Because you weren't a phase, you were a foundation. You were someone they could have built a life with, someone they could have grown with, someone they could have loved in a way that changes everything, but they weren't ready. And now readiness is irrelevant. Because you've outgrown the kingdom you once tried to build with them. You're ruling your own now, stronger, wiser, more rooted in truth than ever before. And the new version of you doesn't beg for understanding. It doesn't explain its standards. It doesn't chase validation from people who threw away gold while looking for glitter. You are the crown. You are the prize. You are the lesson they'll never forget. And that's not arrogance, that's awareness. You've stepped into the knowing that your worth is non-negotiable, that your peace is priority, that your love, while rare, is no longer available to those who mishandled it. And for the first time, they feel the weight of what they lost. Not in a dramatic confrontation, but in quiet moments, when they realize no one else makes them feel seen like you did. No one else understands them without words like you did. No one else loves with the same depth, the same loyalty, the same fire. And that's the part that stays with them. The part they'll replay long after the distractions fade. The part that reminds them that some crowns once dropped don't get picked up again, because some people don't get second chances with royalty. And you're done offering your crown to those who only wanted the title, never the responsibility. You're done handing over your heart to hands that aren't steady. You're done explaining your glow to people who only show up for the light, but never stay for the storm. That version of you, the one who tolerated confusion, who stayed too long, who gave without being met, is gone. And in their place is someone who knows how sacred your presence is, who knows that love, when real, doesn't ask you to prove yourself. It meets you with presence, it builds, not breaks, it protects, not tests, it stays, and the next person who enters your space, they'll have to come correct, they'll have to come whole, they'll have to recognize the crown before they even speak your name, because now you don't lower your standards, you rise to meet them, and if they can't reach, that's not your problem. That's their consequence. You've become untouchable, not because you're bitter, but because you're better. Not because you've hardened, but because you've healed. And now your story isn't about who dropped you, it's about how you rose. If this chapter speaks to your soul, if you see yourself in these words and feel the quiet fire of your own becoming, then take a moment to acknowledge it. Like this video and comment number 1 if you feel this truth deep in your bones. And make sure to subscribe, because we're building a space where healing isn't just a concept, it's a movement. Where stoicism isn't just a mindset, it's a way forward. Where stoic relationships aren't just ideals, they're the new standard. And you're already rising. Let's keep going. They didn't see your worth, and for a long time that might have made you question your own. You asked yourself if you were too much, if you gave too soon, if maybe you should have held back more of your heart. But now you know the truth. You weren't too much, you were rare. You weren't wrong for loving deeply. You were just surrounded by those who didn't know how to receive it. And their blindness, their carelessness, their inability to recognize your value wasn't a verdict on your soul. It was a reflection of their own unreadiness. And now you're done trying to be understood by those who only ever saw you in fragments. You've stepped into something unshakable, something sacred. Not the need to be chosen, but the clarity that you already are. Stoicism has taught you to separate your peace from the storms of others, to anchor yourself in what you control. Your actions, your boundaries, your becoming. And through that lens, you no longer rise for recognition. You rise because it's what you're meant to do. No longer the option, no longer the backup plan. You are the entire path. And while they sit in silence, trying to replay the moments they took for granted, you move forward, strong, still, unstoppable. You've reclaimed your narrative. You've rewritten the terms. And this story, it's not one of heartbreak, it's one of rebirth. The kind of quiet, grounded power that needs no permission to shine. You are no longer waiting for someone to come back. You are no longer seeking what once made you doubt your light, because now the future is watching, and what it sees is someone who did not break, but built, who did not beg, but blossomed, who did not fade, but flourished. That's what they never expected. That your silence would speak louder than your pain, that your healing would echo through every place your presence once lit up, and that your love, so fiercely offered, so freely given, would become the very thing they'll spend a lifetime trying to find again. But it's not theirs anymore. It's yours. And with that truth, you don't just rise, you reign.